Ever been in a meeting where, someone just dictates orders from on high and you're sitting there thinking, there has to be a better way?
Oh, definitely. Or maybe you face one of those conflicts where, well, compromise feels like losing, but domination just feels wrong.
Exactly. These dynamics, they're not new. Humans have been grappling with this stuff in organizations for, well, ages.
Absolutely. These core questions about power, how we collaborate, how we handle disagreement, they're fundamental. Doesn't matter if it's a big company, a nonprofit, even like a volunteer group.
And today we're taking a deep dive into the thinking of someone who is tackling these exact issues way back, actually, early 20th century. But her insights, incredibly relevant now.
You're talking about Mary Parker Follett.
That's the one, often called the mother of modern management.
And it's a fitting title, really, because when she was writing the main management thinking, the so-called scientific approach, it was all very mechanical.
Yeah, efficiency, physical conditions, pay.
Right. Optimize the process, pay people more, assume that fixes everything. Almost like treating the workplace as a machine.
Like workers are just cogs you can grease with a bit more money or better lighting.
Exactly. And Follett looked at all that and basically said, hang on, that's missing something huge. Her big shift, and what our sources, these articles and papers we've looked through really highlight, is the focus.
Moving beyond the technical stuff.
Way beyond. It's the human side, the socio-psychological parts. She saw management as being fundamentally about human relationships and the organization. It's a whole system, not just, tasks and outputs.
So really putting people, their connections, their potential right at the very center. The sources, they mention her belief that managers need to really get it, understand, respect, and even provoke people's enthusiasm.
Yes. Provoke enthusiasm. I love that phrasing. It's not just about making people content, it's about engagement.
And it's about the staff and the organization growing together.
That idea of mutual development, it's so important. It wasn't a zero-sum game for her, where the company wins only if the workers lose something.
Okay, let's start unpacking some of her core ideas then, because they really do offer a different way of looking at things. A really big one, foundational maybe, was her take on power.
Oh, absolutely. This is, I'd argue, one of her most lasting contributions. Follett was one of the first to really clearly say, look, power isn't just one single thing. It shows up differently in groups.
She talked about power over versus power with, right?
Exactly. Power over. That's the one we all recognize instantly. It's coercive. It's one person or group making another person or group do something.
Like the traditional boss just giving orders because they're the boss. Hierarchy.
Precisely. And it often feels extractive, doesn't it? Like everyone's fighting over slices of a fixed pie. Follett thought good managers shouldn't just rely on that, on ordering people around. They should enable people.
Which naturally leads to power with.
And this is where I think her real genius comes through. Power with isn't coercive. It's participative. It's developed together, collaboratively.
So sharing influence, collective action.
Yes. And instead of just dividing up that existing pie, working with people, well, it generates new energy, new ideas. It actually makes the pie bigger. She was a huge advocate for this kind of coactive power in teams.
Making the pie bigger. I like that.
Some sources even mention she talked about a third type, power two, which is more about productive capacity, the ability to create new things, like baking a whole new pie together.
So power with isn't just like a nicer version of power over. It's fundamentally different, more generative.
That's exactly it. She argued that power with, okay, maybe it's not as instant as a direct command, but in the long run, it unlocks way more potential. It leads to more sustainable results because you're tapping into the whole group's energy.
And she connected this to a kind of mindset shift too, didn't she?
She did. Viewing the organization not just as existing for the owners, but for everyone involved, the entire company of workers. When people genuinely feel like they're on the same team, working towards something shared, well, power with just becomes a natural way to operate.
That makes a lot of sense. It's moving from seeing things as adversarial to seeing them as collaborative.
Right.
And that collaborative lens seems especially relevant when we get to conflict. That was another area where she was, well, pretty revolutionary for her time.
Definitely. People call her the mother of conflict resolution for a reason. She completely reframed how we should think about conflict. Back then, mostly, conflict was seen as bad, something to stamp out or avoid.
Yeah, disruptive, negative.
But Follett, she saw it as, first, inevitable, and second, crucially, as potentially constructive.
Constructive, that still feels a bit counterintuitive. Isn't conflict usually just messy?
It can be messy, sure, if you handle it badly. But Follett's point was that conflict is often just a natural result of diversity. You have different people, different views, different needs.
Hmm.
They're going to clash sometimes.
Okay.
And she argued that this clash, if you approach it right, isn't a sign of failure. It's actually an opportunity, a chance for deeper understanding, and maybe, just maybe, creating truly integrated solutions. It forces you to bring differences out into the open.
So how did she suggest handling it constructively? I remember reading she wasn't a big fan of compromise.
No, not really.
Yeah.
She contrasted her preferred method, which she called integration, with the usual ways people deal with conflict.
Which are?
Well, domination, obviously, she rejected. That's just power over, winning, leaving someone defeated. Then there's compromise. Seems fair on the surface, right?
Yeah, meet in the middle.
But she saw it as often inadequate, because both sides usually have to give up something important. It doesn't truly fix the underlying issue, and it can leave people feeling, well, a bit dissatisfied. Our sources also mention voluntary withdrawal, basically just avoiding the issue as even less desirable.
Okay, so integration. What does that actually look like? How do you do it?
It's a process. It starts by really getting everything out on the table. The conflicting desires, the values, the needs. Not smoothing things over, but really digging down to the core of the disagreement.
Being honest about what everyone really wants or needs.
Exactly. Then, through open discussion, the idea is that the different sides re-examine their own positions, try to understand the other side's needs, and then work together creatively to find a new solution. One that satisfies the essential interests of everyone involved.
Wow, that sounds hard. It takes real effort and maybe a different attitude than just trying to win your point.
It absolutely does. Follett was clear about that. She said it requires intelligence, perception, inventiveness, and a genuine willingness to understand the other perspective and collaborate on something novel.
A third way? Maybe.
Yes, transcending the initial either positions to find that third way. And it's no accident, as the sources point out, that she's credited with popularizing the whole idea of a win-win outcome.
Win-win, that phrase is everywhere now. Amazing she was talking about it back then.
Isn't it?
And this focus on dialogue, finding common ground, it must connect to how she saw individuals and groups, right?
Precisely. She didn't view people as just, isolated units making purely rational decisions in a vacuum.
We're social animals.
Fundamentally social beings, exactly. Our
Yeah.
identities, our behaviors, they emerge and get shaped within our relationships and the groups we're part of.
So how I act at work isn't just about my personality, but also about the team dynamics, the company culture.
Yes. She had concepts for this,
Right.
like circular response. Communication isn't just A sends message to B, it's reciprocal. What I say or do influences your response, and your response then influences my next action. It's a continuous feedback loop. We're constantly shaping the interaction together.
Like a conversation that builds on itself, or sometimes, unfortunately, spirals downwards if the feedback is negative or defensive.
Right. Behavior precipitates behavior, as she put it. And she also talked about the law of interpenetration.
Interpenetration.
Yeah, the idea that individuals and groups are mutually conditioning each other all the time, simultaneously. You influence the group influences you, back and forth, constantly.
See, groups aren't just collections of people, they're living things.
Coherent entities, yeah, with their own processes that shape ideas and actions through all this interaction. It makes you think about organizational culture very differently.
It's not just handed down, it's constantly being co-created by everyone interacting.
Exactly. It's alive. And this dynamic view of groups and relationships, well, it naturally led her to rethink leadership and coordination too.
Moving away from the great man theory of leadership, the single hero at the top.
To a large extent, yes. I mean, she acknowledged formal roles exist, but she really emphasized leadership by function.
Meaning
Leadership isn't or shouldn't be just tied to a job title or someone's personality. It should emerge from whoever has the most relevant knowledge or experience for the specific task or situation at hand. It can be fluid.
So the project manager might lead the planning meeting, but the tech lead takes charge when discussing feasibility, even if they're lower in the official hierarchy.
Exactly that. The leader's main job then isn't just to command, but to energize the group, encourage that initiative wherever it comes from, and crucially coordinate all those different efforts towards the shared goal.
Coordination. She saw that as key.
The essential managerial function, she called it, the harmonious ordering of parts.
And she broke that down, didn't she? 4 facets of coordination.
Yes. 4 principles she laid out for making coordination actually work. First, direct contact. Get the people responsible talking directly to each other face-to-face if possible, or at least immediately.
Cut out the middleman.
basically, yeah. Second, early involvement. Bring people into the planning or decision-making right from the start. Don't just present them with a finished plan.
Makes sense. More buy-in.
Third, continuous process. Coordination isn't a one-time thing you do at the beginning. It's an ongoing dialogue. You need permanent ways to keep it happening.
And fourth.
Reciprocal relations. Making sure all the different factors, all the different parties are seen as interconnected and mutually influencing each other. Understanding how the parts relate to the whole.
You know, when you list those four, it sounds remarkably like how modern agile teams talk about working. Daily stand-ups for direct contact, sprint planning for early involvement, retrospectives for continuous process, understanding dependencies for reciprocal relations.
It really does, doesn't it? She was articulating the core principles of effective collaborative teamwork decades before agile methodologies were even a thing.
Amazing.
And another concept that fits right in here is her idea of depersonalized orders.
Depersonalized orders. What on earth does that mean to be? It sounds a bit cold.
It sounds cold, but it's actually about respect, and it connects back to power with. She argued that instructions or decisions shouldn't feel like they're coming arbitrarily from a person just because they have authority that's power over.
Okay.
Instead, the order should arise from the needs of the situation itself, from the facts on the ground. Ideally, it's something understood and agreed upon by both the person giving the instruction and the person receiving it, because it's clear that's what the work requires.
So instead of do this because I'm the boss and I said so, it's more like, okay, the situation demands we do X, right? We both see that.
Precisely. It shifts the focus from obeying a person to collaboratively responding to reality. It empowers people because they understand the why behind the what. It's much more respectful.
This all paints a picture of a really humanistic approach to management.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And our sources actually summarize her humanistic management ideas quite neatly, almost echoing Lincoln, of the people, by the people, for the people.
Okay, interesting. Break that down for me. Of the people.
Of the people means building the organization on people, trusting their abilities, putting human potential right at the center, and actively working to develop that potential.
Okay. And by the people.
By the people is about relying on your human resources, recognizing talent, nurturing it, stimulating it, emphasizing participation. Employees aren't just managed, they are the management in a sense. They contribute ideas, they have agency, they help administrate by them, as one source put it.
So real employee voice and empowerment.
Definitely. And finally, for the people. This means success isn't just about profits for the owners. It's about achieving goals that benefit both the organization and the staff.
Mutual benefit again.
Yes. Promoting a good quality of work life, offering chances to learn and grow, helping people design their own professional paths. Some sources even suggest expanding this for the people idea outwards to include broader societal well-being, what we might now call ESG, or social responsibility.
It's just striking how many of these ideas feel so current, even though she was writing, before widespread electricity, before giant global corporations as we know them. Where did she develop these perspectives?
Well, her background wasn't initially in business at all. It was deeply rooted in public service, social work, community organizing, mostly in Boston. She ran evening school programs, vocational guidance. She saw firsthand how powerful it was when people organized and learned together. She was key in setting up community centers and schools, getting more value out of public buildings after hours.
So she saw community work, democratic participation as a kind of model, not just for society, but for how any group, like a business, could run effectively.
Exactly. She even saw the state itself as an extension of group process. She wasn't just about voting every few years. She advocated for a more direct, associative democracy based on ongoing dialogue and mutual action, which she called the law of co-action. Active participation was key.
Fascinating how she applied those same principles, relationship, participation, emergent leadership, across different scales, from a small community group right up to the level of the state.
It's a very coherent worldview.
Now, obviously her work is hugely influential, but the whole human relations approach, generally speaking, it has faced some criticisms over the years. What are some of those counter-arguments?
Yeah, it's important to look at those two for balance.
Sure.
Our sources mention a few common critiques of the broader human relations movement. Follett herself might not be guilty of all of them, but they're part of the discussion.
Okay.
One criticism is that it can sometimes neglect external factors. Focusing so intensely on internal relationships might mean overlooking big things like market shifts, economic downturns, industry changes that are really impacting the organization.
So you can have great teamwork, but if your product market disappears, you still have a huge problem.
Right. Another point sometimes raised was the analogy of the organization as a kind of nuclear family. Critics argued that can set up unrealistic or inappropriate expectations. Workplaces aren't families, the dynamics are different.
That's a fair point. Boundaries can get blurry.
Then there's the concern about perceived soft-handedness. The idea that if management is only focused on making workers happy, maybe they'll be seen as weak or a staff might take advantage. Happiness is good, but critics argued it isn't the only, or maybe even the best, measure of effective management or productivity.
I've definitely heard that line of argument before, that a focus just on happiness might lead to a drop in discipline or performance standards.
And kind of related to that, a more cynical critique worried that this focus on happiness could actually be used manipulatively
How so?
to make workers feel good and therefore more compliant, maybe working harder for less reward because they feel valued. Essentially, a subtle form of exploitation hidden behind positive psychology.
Oof, that's a sharp criticism and important to think about.
Definitely. And one last point sometimes made is that while the philosophy is powerful, the human relations approach, including Follett's work, sometimes lacks very specific technical, step-by-step instructions for how to achieve something like integration in every single messy conflict.
It gives you the what and the why, but maybe not always a precise how-to manual for every situation.
Kind of, though, given her emphasis on the uniqueness of each situation and the dynamic interplay, maybe a rigid formula would actually contradict her core message.
That's a good point. A one-size-fits-all approach wouldn't really fit her philosophy.
Exactly. So these criticisms, they point to potential pitfalls or limitations, maybe areas for careful application, but they don't really diminish the profound impact and, frankly, the enduring relevance of her core ideas.
And her legacy is just undeniable, isn't it? You see echoes of her everywhere in how modern organizations try to function, or at least aspire to function.
You really, really do. Her work laid such crucial groundwork for later thinkers who pushed these ideas.
It's like she wrote the operating system for understanding how humans work together effectively in groups, and we're still just developing new apps for it today. She saw the power in relationships, the potential hidden in conflict, the importance of shared purpose, long before it was mainstream.
Her work really is still this incredibly rich resource, a guide for anyone trying to make cooperation happen, trying to foster creativity and effectiveness in any group. It really is, as you said earlier, a goldmine of suggestion.
So wrapping up this deep dive into Mary Parker Follett, the big takeaway, I think, is her fundamental view. Organizations aren't static machines. They're dynamic, living social systems.
Yeah, and success for her, it doesn't come from top-down control. It flows from integrating all this diverse interests through strong human relationships, through collaborative group processes.
It's a vision of the workplace, or really any collective effort, where cooperation, mutual respect, and harnessing the group's collective intelligence, those are the real engines for innovation and lasting success.
A very powerful vision.
Which kind of leaves us, and you listening, with something to chew on. How might consciously trying to shift your own perspective, maybe away from thinking about power over a situation or a person, towards exploring what power with might look like? How might that change how you approach a challenge you're facing right now?
Yeah. And maybe think about a conflict you're in, or one you see brewing. Instead of automatically aiming for your side to win, or just settling for a compromise where nobody's really happy,
Yeah.
could you genuinely aim for integration? Could you try to find that creative third-way solution that meets the core needs of everyone involved?
Powerful questions, rooted in ideas from a century ago, but couldn't feel more relevant today. Definitely something to think about until our next deep dive.